Um, bear with me. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this IOA CPD webinar. 6.12 p.m. is the new 8 p.m. My name is Aymen Fetouak. I'm the Head of Professional Development here at the Institute of Hospitality, and I'll be your host for today's session. We're joined by a fantastic panel of industry professionals who will be sharing their expertise and insights on today's topic. Without further ado, let's meet our panelists, and I would like to invite Stuart maybe to start by introducing yourself and maybe a few words about your background, please, Stuart.
Yeah, hello. My name is Stuart Derricott. I am the Sales Director at Zonal Hotel Solutions. We're part of the Zonal group of companies, which supplies EPOS, loyalty, you name it, anything front to back, top to bottom, within around 17,000 locations in the UK across restaurants, bars, pubs, hotels, you name it. My history in this industry is, so I've been with Zonal since last December, which is interesting, baptism of fire. It's a lot going on in this business, which is great. And previous to this, I spent 5 years working for a company doing operational software. So that was housekeeping, maintenance, etc., within sort of brands like Hilton and Accor that we worked with. And then before that, I've worked in upselling, so upselling rooms and sort of accessories into people who are sort of coming into hotels. And before that, channel management. So I worked in a few channel managers over my time as well. So yeah, that's me. And I'm a fellow of the Institute of Hospitality. So had our fellows dinner last night, which was great to see you, Aymen, there. So that was good.
Thank you, Stuart, and it was good to see you too. Thank you very much. Kez, if I come to you next.
Morning all. I'm Kez Osborne. I work for Austell Brewery. Have done now for 5 years, just over 5 years. Before that, I was with Austell Brewery, Whitbread, for about 17 years, and had my own business in between. So learned all the pitfalls of systems and bits and pieces. Yeah, now I'm an area manager, and I look after some other things like innovation, systems, new projects, and bits, which is where the link in with Stuart's been on a recent project, which has kind of taken us the last 5 months-ish. Yeah.
Thank you, Kez. Reuben, I'll come to you next.
Yeah, morning everyone. I'm Reuben, Senior Insight Consultant at CGA by NIQ now since the acquisition. And we are a specialist research and insights company working entirely within hospitality and the out of home. So I work with Zonal on their GoTech reports, which this webinar is based on, one of the ones we put out this year. So I've been invited as their guest to come along today.
Thank you very much. So today we'll be exploring the webinar title 6:12 p.m. is the new 8 p.m. Really like the title. So we're bringing together diverse perspectives and insights from different angles. Reuben, if I could start with you. First question. Can you give us an overview of how the research and how did that go, and who did your survey? What did you ask them, Reuben?
Yeah, of course. So we base these reports on a survey that we do every quarter, which goes out to 5,000 respondents who are nationally representative of people who eat and drink out of home, so who are actively engaged with the market. And we make sure that we're hitting all the quotas for age, gender, region, and location, things like that. So it's representative of the entire Great British hospitality market. And the questions within there, we knew there was some sense that trade was changing. People seem to be struggling in the late night in ways that there hadn't been previously. So we had a set of questions asking, are you going out earlier or later for this range of events, following up with why you might be going out earlier or later, and asking, just in this one example, what is your preferred booking time if you're going out for a meal? And that's what that 6:12 p.m. figure is based on. But we had some other supplementary data sources as well. So from Zonal's booking data and through some EPOS feeds that we get that is direct sales information, we could tell that there has been a shift year on year or over the past couple of years in sales moving earlier through from the evening to, well, earlier in the evening, depends exactly how you cut it. But it all corroborated that same story that we are seeing this shift, and we wanted to dig into the reasons behind that.
Thank you, Reuben. So there is a Go Technology report. So what were the standout findings from that report? Were there any surprises at all?
Yeah, I think what struck us when we looked at it was how almost mundane the drivers of the change were. Not to say that they weren't interesting, but you know, when people are telling you what they're going out for in hospitality, it's normally they're seeking something. They're going out for an event, or they are driven by a deal, or they're going out to see their friends and family. Whereas when we looked at the reasons to why people were going out earlier in the evening, it was far more holistic and a lot harder to nail down exactly why. It came down to preference or people's lifestyles changing, or just an overall sense that things are different now to how they were before COVID or a couple of years ago. So I really liked it as a piece of research because it raised as many questions as it brought up. And I think that's why this change in trade has snuck up on a lot of people, because there's no big single issue that you can point at to say, this is why my trade has changed. It's all these hundreds, thousands of little decisions that consumers are making that has resulted in trade being on aggregate significantly different. And then an operator might turn around and say, hey, well, where's my post 9 p.m. trade gone? It's suddenly dead when it used to be one of our core trading hours. So I think that is what stuck out to me. And because it is that holistic spread across all these behaviors, demands, attitudes of consumers, the extent to which consumers are getting behind this shift is quite strong as well. If someone is likely to be going out earlier for one type of event, they are quite likely to be going out earlier for all types of events. It's not so much that people are picking and choosing and, oh, it's just, you know, a trip to a bar or a nightclub where my behavior is changing. That's come earlier, and it's perhaps where it's most noticeable because it's that real withdrawal from the late night where the trade isn't being supplemented by anything new. But earlier in the day as well, people are choosing to dine out earlier, start their visits earlier at the start of the day if they're going for a whole day session. So it really is an entire shifting of that window of opportunity.
Thank you, Reuben. In terms of the demographic groups that are driving this change, who are these, Reuben?
We did see some stronger over indexes among those people going out earlier, among women, younger consumers, city dwellers, and people who go out to market more frequently. And I think a lot of that is all going to tie back to city living. You know, they tend to have a younger skewing population. There's a more dynamic hospitality market, so it tends to encourage more frequent visits. So I think a lot of it does come back to urbanicity. But then when we looked at the data, there was quite a few other factors that are particular to individual groups. So women going out earlier might have been driven more by safety concerns or a spotty public infrastructure. So you don't necessarily want to be relying on buses at the end of the night. And if your alternative is an expensive taxi, how about we just shift our visits earlier entirely? And for the people who are most engaged with the market, who are going out really often, quite a few of them said they're going out both earlier and going out later. So it's not everybody acting in exactly the same way, but across this kind of confluence of factors, there is generally an increase in appetite for earlier trade going out in the day.
Thank you, Reuben. Kez, Stuart, any reflections on Reuben's comments there?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So since joining Zonal, you know, it's one of the things I have noticed that they are very, very key in working with companies like CGA and reporting this sort of data and putting it out there. And you know, I'll probably get shot for saying this, but it's not for sort of altruistic reasons. You know, we obviously do it because it's marketing and it helps us to sort of keep an audience and grow an audience out there, and people to look at that data. But it's also free, and it's sort of something that operators can hook into and look at. I think some of the information that you might get internally, you might get something that says to you, okay, well, we sold 20 more pints of beer at this time than we did at that time. But this side of the data sort of tends to humanize it a little bit and give you the reasons why. And some of the information you get sort of internally, unless you've got a very good loyalty system and somebody's using it at that point when they've come in, you might not know. What the age is, what the demographic is of that person, etc. So having this sort of data come out there and sort of, put the other side of the picture is quite interesting. But it's also, it's quite, some of this is quite subtle shifts. So it's not sort of, some things that are happening, 2% shifts, may not seem big, but if they're showing over a period of time, you can see a trend. And those trends might not be actually happening in your region right now, but it's something that's happening, that you can see in certain regions and may move out to your region. So it just helps you to sort of plan and sort of look at where the markets are going, in conjunction with your own sort of data. And as Reuben said, some of that data that's looked at is data that's pulled out from our EPOS, etc. But a lot of it is those questions about, why people are doing things, what their sort of motivation is, which you will never pick up sort of swiping somebody's card through an EPOS. So it's a different way of sort of looking at that data.
Thank you, Stuart. So from an operator's perspective then, so what are the key takeaways for hospitality here? And how can they, respond?
I think, the thing about this sort of thing is looking at where it's happened and why it's happened. And it's interesting because when I read these sort of reports, I'll go and have those conversations with my friends and colleagues and say, hey, I've just read this. Is that real? Is that true to what's actually going on? And a lot of it is around sort of like, changes in work patterns, way people work now. I'm sort of at the end of the Elizabeth line, sort of in Berkshire. Used to work in London, don't anymore, work sort of like, remotely. A lot of the people I know are now working remotely, either that or a hybrid. And they are sort of, definitely changing the patterns in how they behave and going out and things around that a lot of the time. So, I know that sort of, people are saying to me, oh, should we go out this night, that night? And it's either the nights that they're not in London because they don't have to do that commute out, get dressed, like you've been on the train, you don't want to like go out in the same shirt. I'm wearing the shirt, I could go straight out now and sort of like at 6 o'clock and it because I haven't been on a train or in London or, whatever, want to sort of come in and refresh yourself. It's not so important. And I think, in a household, when you're sort of there and your sort of other half is going to be ready, you're ready earlier as well. So you're tending to push out more. And I think, also, from the point of view of operators, when they're sort of offering deals, they tend to be earlier in the evening as well to try and drive, there have been in the past to drive that happy hour or those sort of activities, after the after work sort of thing. So, from their point of view, taking this sort of data and being able to use it to say, okay, well, where we got downtimes, when do we sort of need to look at the best time to sort of employ people or have staff on, all of those sort of things, it really helps that sort of side of things massively.
Thank you, Stuart. In terms of booking times, what do you think is driving the shift towards earlier booking times?
I think a lot of those sort of things. It's interesting because, I'd love to see, and I think Reuben alluded to this, how this also equips with things like gyms and stuff like that, and other things that people do pre or post work sort of time. And how it also shifts across weekends and things like that, because I think that's worked quite well. Obviously with booking systems and things like that, you can look at that data and see, okay, well, are we getting more bookings at X and Y time? Why is that happening? Is there something we can do to push that back a little bit and sort of put an offer in here or there? But as I say, it doesn't give you that demographic sort of look at it. So and that sort of thing, I think, when you are looking at systems and things, is to sort of maybe the demographic is a good way of saying, okay, well, I have got people coming in at a certain time, are they a certain age, do certain age groups spend more, can I push that back to a certain time, can I do things to make my business work better, in that sort of it's, and obviously, we work in booking systems and things like that, and not specifically always with people like Cares, etc., but there's a lot of systems out there, but that sort of data that you're capturing, can help sort of to really mould how you want to sort of do your marketing and things like that.
Just following up on that, I think people book because it's convenient. They want to make their time out in hospitality as enjoyable and niggle-free as they can. And I think this desire to go out earlier is all just feeding into that as well. It's that convenience and comfortable quality that people are after. So if your problem is then, oh, it's a struggle to get home later at night, or it's going to be too late, I'm going to be tired the next day, we are seeing people changing their behaviours in a lot of ways, whether they be watching what they drink, what time they want to get back home, if they've got family or care responsibilities, it just makes it easier to go out in the day. There's so much that feeds into this kind of mass wake up that people have had, where everyone has kind of gotten onto the fact that you can go out earlier and still have such a good time. All you're doing is shifting your window forward a little bit. And I think that is a big part of it. It is just the ease and convenience that has opened up to people as a kind of social option.
Yeah, I think totally agree with that. And I think also, sort of like everybody is working, I think, a little bit harder these days. And, when you have got early calls and early morning meetings and things like that, you don't want to be sort of like out that bit later. And you need to have that little bit more recovery time, to sort of be on an 8 a.m. call or whatever. So I think, that sort of shift in workload has an impact as well.
Thank you. Kez, on the early booking trends, so are you seeing this shift in consumer behaviour in your operations in your region?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think since COVID, we've seen a small shift, and not one we actually drilled into, noticed, or I think it was from the conversations and the studies that are going on. It's kind of brought to our attention because it was so marginal. But in the background, subconsciously, we have been making our changes, following the city in terms of, earlier sittings, or like a meal deal offer of sorts, or an earlier menu. So we haven't really had to change an awful lot, but definitely hearing the noises, and learning how to react to that. I think we've started to map out what that looks like in terms of all the things Stuart's just discussed in terms of loyalty. So yeah, we're definitely noticing it more in our city pubs. I guess if we were going to try to define where it's coming from and where the results are, most of our pubs are sat in a coastal location, so it is a bit more chill. They do have to go home. They do have to get changed. They have to get out their swimsuits and wetsuits and bits and pieces. So it kind of, I don't know when we'll catch up with the city in terms of that trend, but it's a bit more of a lifestyle operation down there. But yeah,
I think it's interesting from your point of view. Sorry, Aymen, but you are much more, I think, in a lot of your locations, a holiday destination. And I think you would see a completely different trend slightly, because people are more relaxed and will be doing things on the beach and then go out later. Whereas, and that sort of plays into this, I think, because it sort of like shows that there's a different in different locations and different sort of, reasons for people being in those locations, sort of probably plays out quite well with the data as well.
Yeah, I don't believe one rule will fit all in this scenario, but it's just a smaller dimension of the ripple effect that kind of comes down to us.
How about the type of the venue as well as the location?
Yeah, so places like Exeter and the like, and Truro, they do see a different earlier booking trend where they've got theatres and other bits to bolt onto their experience. Whereas in the coastal locations, it is the experience. So the dwell time seems to be longer in those destinational sites. Whereas in the city, it's kind of a bit more of a transaction. They're kind of got somewhere to go or been somewhere. They need to get back on a train, or so I can see it and feel it, but it's not big enough to make a huge impact based on A, where we are, and B, what type of sites we've got.
Thank you. And are you having to make operational changes to adapt to these changing habits at all? Things like your rotas and other things that you have to adapt to?
Yeah, I guess good question. We thought about expanding our day part menus. We've thought about, in a lot of sites, we've gone after brunch, breakfast, more so, because I think that was probably where the city was 6, 9, 12 months ago. So we kind of latched onto that part of the day part menu. We've definitely got a day menu that finishes at 5-ish. Really new and 2 and 3 course menus. So there are things that we are doing subconsciously maybe. But yeah, there is stuff there, but I don't think it's due to the fact that we knew it was neating out, change or swing. I think it's quite a new thing for us.
Yeah. Thank you, Kez. And again, from an operator's perspective, do you feel like you have to cater to both early and late diners without having to compromise the experience for each group?
Yeah, so we haven't really had to change too much, but what I have done is try to expand on both of those day parts individually. So yes, it's not really been a conscious decision based on facts. I'll be brutally honest, but it is something we definitely have looked at. The rush for the wellness menus, the protein bowls, all that kind of stuff that are coming out in the magazines after COVID. It's been a real shift change in the kind of menu dynamic. A healthier option. They want to eat a bit earlier. Some groups do for sure. So we've definitely lent into that and definitely gone down less seed oils and all those kind of good things that would balance out. Next is our how we have a better drinks range, and our non-alcs have gone they've absolutely rocketed, to be fair. Prop Job Zero for one is just some of the outselling some of our beer ranges. So we are seeing a big shift in alcohol, which has probably helped and shaped some of this earlier booking trend, because they're not some of our subgroups aren't really there to have 4 and 5 beers, and some are there for that transaction occasion and more of a healthy kind of feel good event.
Thank you. Stuart, who do you think is being affected the most here? Restaurants, hotels, or even smaller operations, pubs?
I think it's all. I think sort of like this sort of thing with booking trends probably affects restaurant-led locations more because they are more focused on that sort of thing. They don't tend to have a sort of separate sort of like bar or pub or whatever, because if they that's what they're sort of heading on. Hotels, it's interesting. I mean, I speak to a lot of hoteliers and a lot of sort of groups like Kez's. And there is sort of like, conversations I've had with people about earlier shutting and then sort of like, and I literally was in a hotel up in Sleaford about 10 days ago, 18 bedroom, a nice little location, turned up and one of the first things the guy said to me, I said, "Oh, we're quite quiet tonight, we'll probably shut the bar about 10. And, and I don't ever remember having those conversations with any operator 10 years ago. And I think it's just an interesting sort of shift, that, and you always pick up on things like that. And it's, yes, it's anecdotal, but it is sort of, something that you sort of notice. I think wet-led pubs, definitely less because people are going there for something different. So, it's not a booking situation, it's a walk-in situation, and it tends to be a younger sort of different crowd. So I think, it's definitely the places where you are booking, and as Reuben said, it's that sort of convenience sort of the booking and ease of booking, seeing what's available and everything, which I think sort of helps to push that as well, because with most systems these days, you can actually say, okay, well, do they have a table at X? Great, we'll go then. And that's what seems to be getting booked earlier, is those sort of like, earlier sort of time slots.
And on that point, Stuart, actually, to your point about shutting earlier, we've definitely used the data to gauge when those quiet half an hours are coming in. And going back, I've never shut a business earlier than 11, just because you want consistency. But we've definitely split into like a winter and summer opening flexibility. So where you've got those destination sites, they don't need to be open till 11. And it's quite staggering, really, when our pubs are pubs. I guess that's the one biggest shift we've had when you reflect on it, is there's definitely some savings there in terms of labour, but is that a mixed messages for our guests in terms of, can they then trust to be there between 10 and 11? Do they then come out earlier? Are we forcing the hand there in terms of that? So it'd be good to understand that maybe a bit more.
Interesting, yeah, agree.
Thank you. Reuben, if I come to you next. So why do you think Gen Z is traditionally associated with nightlife? Why do you think they're most likely to prefer earlier bookings?
Yeah. Well, I think first thing to say is that, yeah, they are likely to be going out earlier, but they are still the cohort who is most likely to be keeping the late night alive as well. So they are going out across the board, but they do lead the trends in both directions. It's not a complete pullback and movement to earlier booking, but there definitely is more trade available to capture from them in those earlier slots. And I think COVID is the big break point in a lot of ways, especially for those late night visits, going out of the town, going to nightclubs, going to bars. I think there was a break in the onboarding procedure for a lot of young people. And I think lockdown lent itself to a more comfortable, cozy lifestyle as well. You can't get out for those high tempo events. So if you've never experienced it, you've kind of missed out on those formative years when you would be learning how to navigate that marketplace. It's really hard to bring that back after the fact. So I think people do settle into, you know, whether they want to go to a wet-led pub as an alternative instead. And it still offers that high tempo demand, but it is a bit more comfortable. It's available earlier in the day, and you don't have to stay out as long for it. And that wraps in with a lot of other trends as well. So Gen Z are moderating more, or they are more likely to be conscious of their alcohol consumption and their general health and well-being, like as was mentioned about the new menus that they're putting on as well. I think a lot of that is placing more scrutiny on the types of places people go, and instead of going out to hospitality for a purely drink-led high-tempo event, you may be going out for a more experience-led event instead. And I think pubs and experiential bars can cater to that in a new way as well. So, I mean, we've all seen the classic golf and flight club, escape rooms, all of those types of things. But it's more than that. You can incorporate it into your day-to-day restaurants, pub offerings as well, whether it be quizzes, tasting menus, meet the chef sessions, things like that. Everything that can offer something new to a generation that is always seeking new experience above anything else, because they haven't found their favorites or their routines necessarily. So that demand for newness and trial and experience is so much stronger within that generation. Add on to that, we've got those problems that we've already mentioned about spotty infrastructure, them being more likely to live in urban environments where there is that dynamic offer already on your doorstep. So it's way easier for them to change their habits based on the types of operators that are close to them. So there is plenty that has happened, and it's hard to pin it down to a single factor. But again, it's just this constellation of drivers that are shifting that window most strongly among Gen Z.
Thank you. Kes, Stuart, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. I mean, you know, I think Kez and me are both of an age where we've got sort of young adults. I think we refer to them as now in the family. And definitely sort of that sort of sways into to what I'm seeing with them and their friends and you know, of that sort of thing. Again, anecdotal, but these sort of things tend to bear out, etc. You know, and they tend to also, there seems to be sort of an interesting thing I see now with people and you know, what Reuben was saying about the experience thing, where it's not just going to a pub and drinking. You know, pubs are doing sort of like activities now, and you know, and gaming, or you know, sort of like you know, I saw one the other day, and you can book a slot for Monopoly. You know, it's all sorts of things that they're sort of trying to increase the sort of the footfall by sort of encouraging things. But it's not just now about, you know, I'm sure Ken will agree, when we were sort of that sort of age, it was a go out and have a few beers and that was about it. But there seems to be a lot more out there to do now. And I think also, you know, part of the change sort of like with them going early and sort of later could be that there's a much more of a fitness focus for Gen Zs these days. And I think some of them, you know, again, anecdotal, but I see it sort of, you know, with all the sort of families that I know locally, is the kids will go out to you know, either go out early or then they'll go to the gym and then go out. And that sort of plays in. So again, you know, as I said earlier, I'd be interested to see sort of like how the footfall and the demographics work in gyms and how that plays against what we're doing, because it might give us sort of an interesting sort of picture against that. I don't know if Reuben's company do any work for gym groups, but you know, it'd be an interesting one to look at.
Yeah, not currently, but I'll keep an eye out.
Yeah.
And to your point as well, we've definitely gone down the experiential route in terms of, you know, how do we create something different? Because food and drink is expensive. It's expensive for the family. It's expensive for those who want to indulge. But yeah, we've looked at Meet the Brewers. We've looked at, I mean, each of our sites have been tasked to have sales plans where actually we didn't focus on that a huge amount before. The connections into communities, you know, how do we get the family sector in? How do you focus on you know, what you're doing for your local charity? You know, how do we raise money? How do you kind of, all that is you know, live in our businesses, which probably wasn't as much. It was probably only in selected sites who are very well connected due to their geographical position. But realistically, you know, we've got destinational pubs doing stuff like that now. You know, interactive quizzes, and yeah, it's quite phenomenal. It's good. It's probably exciting for those coming into the industry, because you can bring some of your own character into that business, as opposed to just ticking off the list of things to do today as a job list.
Yeah,
you can be very creative.
Reuben, in terms of booking preferences, we look at the difference between urban and rural consumers. What should operators in these areas consider?
I mean, I think Kev nailed it before when he said it's based on what's immediately available, how easily you can access it. And Stuart said before as well, if you live in a city, you can just go straight out after work, or, you know, it's no real burden to go home and change and come back out again. Whereas in more rural or destination pubs, we are seeing that preferred booking times staying later in the evening. I don't know, maybe around like 6:45 as opposed to the 6:12 that we've got nationally, because I think there is still that recognition that you're gonna have to go home, the travel time, everything else that factors into it. I think what stood out to me is, yeah, rural consumers still might prefer to make a later booking, but it's still all shifting earlier in the day. And when we followed up in the survey and asked, why are you going out earlier? Consumers, I think the biggest difference that we got is within London and outside of London. And the key there was, within London, fewer people said, oh, my lifestyle has changed, compared to those outside of London, where that was a way bigger driver of changing behaviour. And I think London has always been that different beast. There's always been unlimited hospitality options and experiences available on your doorstep. It's outside of these hyper-dense urban areas where people are seeing what's available to them change, they're seeing their lifestyles and their preferences change, and there's a greater recognition that, what am I trying to say? I think, yeah, it's maybe just coming from a different base, so the same level of change, that same directional shifting going out earlier means a lot more to people without those infinite options on the doorstep. So there is a greater drive to get people in, whether it be events, whether it be those Meet the Brewer sessions that Kez mentioned. These more rural spots are needing to put a focus on trading plans, footfall. How do we get people in the door when incidental trade just isn't cutting it in the way that it typically always has done in urban areas, and still continues to some degree, though we are seeing the same trends of, you know, increased events, increased experience across the country. It's just new to a lot more rural customers and rural operators. And I think that is the big difference between the two.
Sure. Thank you. In terms of technology, the digital world, AI and so on, so what role can technology play in terms of helping operators navigate the changes and especially the consumer behaviour, Stuart?
Well, obviously, I mean, a lot of this comes back to data. I mean, like, you know, we're picking up data from all over the place, how we interpret that data, what you do with it, etc. Having a good CRM, you know, behind that, so you know, managing your customer data, understanding what they're doing, how you can influence that, how you can use that to sort of use promotions. You know, I mean, obviously we provide a CRM, other CRMs are available, as they say, but you know, that's sort of reading that data and getting that information. You know, how can we sort of use that to sort of to change patterns or behaviour, or capture people in the right way, etc. But also, you know, it sort of, this sort of thing feeds into us and what we do, and our sort of, like, because we have a roadmap of product development, and you know, if we're seeing changes in trends and things like that, and the sort of conversation about the activities bookings that plays into that as well, because you know, we've been adding in the ability to not just book a room, but book a table at a restaurant and then a meeting room and all that sort of stuff. And you know, now we're sort of working on development of hooking into the activities and things that you can book those at a certain time. So if you are turning up somewhere, you can say, okay, well, I'm getting my hotel room, I've got my sort of dinner, which you know we're having a work dinner. Oh, but you know, sort of like, we need some meeting space and we want an activity, and hooking all of that information together and dragging it in. And making it very easy, whereas before that might have been a 3, 4, 5 conversation thing, emails for one part, you know, a sort of booking system on another. But all of that feeding back in, and then use of being able to use all of the data about all of the different things you're picking up, and sort of guide you on your business and what you want to do with it. But not just businesses like ours as well, you know, from the point of view of how it drives how we sort of provide technology.
Because how do you think it will affect things like promotions, menu designs, and the entertainment? We talked about businesses having to come up with new ideas and activities and things. How do you think technology will affect that?
I mean, it's huge. We've literally just embarked, I'd say this year, in lots of things like our ZHS system. We've completely changed our hotel system, booking systems, Room Genie. We've landed several intuitive systems that allow us to get better data, to create better loyalty. And currently we don't. Well, we do, but we don't have the best in the market. So we're trying to re-engineer our position to understand our guests more, because quite frankly, you know, the data is rich, and it's out there, readily available. So how does tech affect it? I mean, from a promotions point of view, you know, Fanzo and the like, there are other systems and pieces, but I'd say 50% more of our sites now do premium sports off the back of some of the data we are getting, knowing what times people are coming into our business. So it's really interesting, and it's vast. You almost need a team to understand that data, you know, if you want to make the most out of it. But yeah, we've had a really great journey in the last 12 months, understanding those profiles.
I think, I mean, like, we've all got those, you know, email inboxes in the morning where you see all the promotions and everything coming in, and that's all data driven, you know, and businesses do that the same way. So, excuse me, that's my front doorbell. Hello, thanks, Alexa. So yeah, and it is, you know, and it's interesting because, you know, I know if I go on certain websites that I'll get an email 20 minutes later, you know, say, oh, you browsed and looked at, you know, here's an extra, try this, etc. So it's sort of like having all of those sort of bits of technology from the booking side to the CRM and everything, and the marketing side all joined in, so you can try and make the most out of that. And you know, one of the things that Kez just mentioned was you know, we have systems now that will look at room pricing and see that it's right for the market, that will look at what's happening from the point of view of, you know, if you go and want to book on a website directly, well, what's that sort of price comparison on at the OTAs, and is it better for you to take the direct path, and what can be done to incentivize that, because that means, you know, more money in somebody like Kez's pocket. So, you know, it all works together, I think, the whole sort of thing, and working with your suppliers to make sure that everything is heading, you know, in the right direction. And also suppliers sharing the data like this, but sharing their direction, their roadmap, what they're looking to do in the future, and to make sure that fits with the, you know, the operators and their sort of view on where things are going.
But you've got to have the right systems to collect that data, yeah. the right websites to house and funnel it in. And, that was a big realization for us in the Southwest, was actually we need to have a bigger investment. It's not just the system, it's about how we manage that data and how we outwardly market to our guests, because we thought we were doing really well, but actually AIs and new systems have come on so well in the last, I'd say, 2 or 3 years. I mean, it's just accelerated. It's kind of left us thinking we need to do something quick. So we've absolutely invested heavily into our website, CRM, booking channels, marketing, new menu layouts, using some of that data, upsells. Doesn't just say fish and chips anymore or burger anymore. There are literally, how would you like it? And crikey, they want fries. Well, let's put fries and let's put all the different toppings that can go with the fries, not just list all the fries. Just those little things from the data you get and spend ahead, and how you drive your teams to be more efficient, and cover that business cost, because it's exponentially gone up at more than we could probably put food up. I would say.
So looking ahead, how do we see this trend evolving, maybe over the next 12 months or so?
I think it's going to be rapid. In my opinion, I think there's a lot of companies, a lot of people, and a lot more data. I think as we get more data, and that's widely bought, used, spread in different forums. I think those who embrace it and move with it will probably keep up with the trend. I think those who choose to ignore it will be, will then struggle and have to have a even bigger investment or look in the mirror in a year or two's time.
Thank you. Okay, so I've come to my last question, and what I'd like to do now, if I may, maybe this is a question to everyone for the whole panel. So, what advice would you give to other operators looking to make the most of this shift in consumer behaviour? Reuben, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think we have touched on it. The difficulty trying to be everything to every consumer. I think that is where we're going to see a lot of investment. And I think we don't necessarily see the full effect of the shifts when you're looking at venue types by such a strict typology. Nightclubs and bars might be closing, but pubs are doing okay. But there's so much more detail within that to be found. You'll see pubs now that are open for coffee trade in the morning. You can book a meeting room. You can stay at the hotel in the evening. And as you get towards evening time, they're going to start putting the quizzes on. They're going to start turning music up, maybe getting some live performers, that kind of thing. I think that is really where we're going to see a lot of investment and a lot of development, is individual venues realizing that there is scope to pick up on this trade, and you're not going to so narrowly sit in a single bucket anymore. You really have to do everything you can to maximize that consumer appeal throughout your entire trading day.
Thank you, Reuben.
I'd agree with that wholeheartedly, and I think also, sort of, we all get all of this data. I think, as Kez said, listening to it is a key thing, but also working with your suppliers and those sort of people around you to make sure that your systems are ready for it. That they are sort of moving with the trends, that you're not sort of like missing sort of slots and everything and sort of things. And it's interesting what Reuben said about sort of, pubs being open in the morning for coffee. And that is definitely something I've noticed. Whereas, I'm a great lover of when I get somewhere, I tend to leave earlier, and I'm sort of, into a Costa or a Starbucks or somewhere. But the number of pubs when I turn up into town to go to a meeting now that are open in the morning for a coffee and a snack and things, and that was pretty unheard of 5-6 years ago. That was they opened at 11, sort of 12 o'clock for lunch, and that was it. Whereas there's a definite shift forward for their availability, and I think also a lot of that sort of data is stuff that is going to give you the ability to look at that information and say, okay, well, what is our demographic, etc. What is the market we're looking at? Where are we getting that data from, and how do we pitch ourselves to it? And again, you go back 5-6 years, a lot of that information wasn't available, and I think now it is. And as Kerr said, sort of like the people who listen to the data, I think the people who'll do well. Because they'll sort of be following the market and looking at where things are going and knowing where to pitch themselves. And the people who may sort of fall off, and we've seen some closures recently, of some certain pizza sort of outlets, no names, no sort of drill, but they've had the same menu and the same sort of like offering for years, and I don't think they've ever changed that to their demographic and how things are shifting in the market. And that's where I think people will fall off. They won't be doing that. Okay, what are we looking at? Where's the market going? Let's make sure our offering is heading in the right direction and the same way that the market's going.
Thank you. I'm just conscious of the time. First of all, thank you to the audience for sending some questions there. So if I read the first one that's come through, does the shift in booking times affect costs, i.e. staff shifts have gone down, so savings on labour, maybe energy saving costs due to shorter opening times?
It's a good question. I can take that if you want.
Thank you.
In terms of energy costs, yeah, I mean, absolutely. We've definitely, and it's not so much about when we've only moved 1% and 2%. I think in general, I think energy is been a huge player. So menu creation and how that's been designed and how you utilise less of the equipment in the kitchen in the afternoons is critical. Given we have very little control over setting those rates, so we've definitely utilised. We've got all of our sites have gone onto the meter, so we can actually get daily reports of our energy. I mean, we've gone into that much detail to understand it, and it's a good investment because now our teams are ranked to understand how efficient their business can be. So we'll notice it on their report in the morning. I think it sharpens the mind. So yeah, from an energy point of view, absolutely is. Rotors, we've definitely gone into it. I think that's probably more of an external factor currently for us in terms of the national insurance increase, which is kind of focused us into the 15-minute day part and using the zonal data then to work out sales versus what do we need and how do we deploy team more effectively. It's something that's definitely been ramped up in the last 6 months. I'd say even maybe 12 months actually. I think we could probably go back a bit further.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any further thoughts on that at all?
Labour costs are particularly difficult. I mean, a lot of sites are operating on razor thin margins, but like as mentioned before as well, it's that choice of, do I close a bit earlier, even though I've advertised to be open to 10, 11 p.m. I think if we can get more tech solutions in place that, they allow you to maximise your dwell time or your customizability of your offer to just increase any spend that you can, enhance the customer visit however you can. Yes, it could open up the option to save staffing costs if this is going to be a quiet spot, do a take staff off. But on the other hand, it also, if you can get a little bit more spend per head out of every transaction, it could free up a bit of cash to put it back into that consistency of offer. Hospitality is always going to need someone there pouring the pints or serving the food. So if tech investment can free up a bit more spend to go back into staffing, so you can say, this is my offer, I am here until 11 p.m. every night, then it helps stave off that fear of a kind of spiral of decline where consumers don't come because they don't know if you're going to be open, and then you start closing earlier and earlier because of it. So it's not always cost cutting. Sometimes it's about reinvestment into the site as well.
I think also there's a big sort of push and trend now in a lot of larger hotels with technology to hook everything together, so you can actually switch things down when there's not people around and save money because you're not got lights blaring and there's nobody actually in the location. So automated lighting or room sort of automation that can sort of hook in and say, okay, well, the PMS is saying there's nobody in there at the minute, let's switch everything down, but they're coming in at X time, let's switch it up. So, there's a lot of sort of integration of systems which sort of, is moving forward as well.
I think shortening breakfast times as well. I think you'll find some businesses are open from 7 till, and 11. So you've got to make that choice whether you start it a bit later, depending on where you sit, or you open to the public earlier. So there's some golden nuggets there, really.
Thank you. We have another question. Given that consumers are choosing to go out earlier, is the government on the wrong path by considering extending the opening hours for pubs, bars and restaurants to boost the nighttime economy? Or will this policy inject momentum and interest back into late night venues? I think that's a very good question.
Well, I mean, I think there's other things they could be doing and concentrating on, if I'm honest. Be it the national insurance, things like that, be it sort of taxes and VAT on certain foods and things like, from that point of view, and I think some of the trends towards the supermarkets who you can go in and get everything you want for a dinner for a tenner, and everything, but that's no VAT on it, and yet Kes has an operation which has VAT on it, so it's instantly putting 20% on. I think, they really ought to be concentrating on more of those areas and how you can drive business. And if they actually took some of this data, they might actually be able to look at what they're doing better rather than just going, okay, let's add an hour on here, because I don't think they're understanding where the market is and where it's going. They're just presuming. So I think, if they actually wanted to have people like Reuben go and talk to them, I think they'd learn far more and be able to sort of, base it. And if they listen to the actual words that UK hospitality and people like that are saying, I think they would probably make a better stab at helping out the industry.
And I think they've just scored an own goal there, really, with the ERP tax. It's just it doesn't. There's very little benefit currently to go down that route, knowing with labour costs being so high, ERP taxes coming in. It is a challenge. So yes, there's something we need to give, I think, for us to gamble and go later rather than the other. But to Reuben's point, downward spiral in shutting your hours. From 11 to 10:30 equally has a knock-on effect too. So I don't think there's an easy answer there.
Reuben, anything else to add?
I'll be a little bit more generous. There is a lot more that could be done to support hospitality, but at least in this instance, we know younger consumers are the most engaged. They are going out earlier, but there's still a cohort who wants to go out later and keep the nightlife alive. So removing any burdens that you can, great. Is it enough of a burden lifted compared to everything else hospitality is facing? Perhaps not, but it's something that could allow hospitality to operate at a greater potential if it also receives the rest of the support that it needs.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the questions. And before we wrap up, so I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to our brilliant panelists today for sharing their experiences and their insights. And thank you all for joining us today.